Growth Pod is brought to you by Genero, a leading growth agency in the Nordics. We interview marketing experts, business leaders, and entrepreneurs to uncover the stories and strategies behind profitable growth.
Today's guest is Thomas Floberg, the COO and Director of Marketing and Operations at Microsoft Sweden. Welcome to the show, Thomas.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
I'd love to just start with your background. So you've been working at Microsoft for quite a long time. What got you there, and why have you decided to stay for so long?
So I think I've been at Microsoft for 17 years. And before that, I was in the telco industry. And I've always been fascinated by technology. And as such, working for one of the companies that have a large impact on so many people's, life and the impact people can make, that really got me fascinated. And the reason why I stayed for 17 years or so is that I, every day see the impact that technology can make in organizations, in companies, and on individuals. So that's what keeps me staying and keep going at Microsoft, and I love it.
Yeah, I can imagine many more exciting companies than Microsoft if you want to see like massive scale of impact of technology on a massive scale. One piece that you've been really focused on personally, and of course Microsoft as a company has been really involved in, is this new situation of hybrid work or remote work. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys at Microsoft what's been your approach to hybrid work? Are you doing fully remote, fully, 5 days a week in the office, or something in between?
Yeah. So of course, I think, for sure the pandemic that happened, what is it now, 2.5 years ago or so, 3.5 years, that had that profound impact on how we are working and where we are working. Before the pandemic, we all had a choice. Do we want to go to the office or do we want to stay at home? And I think that many of us experienced going to the office as the place to do work. And now, again, we have a choice. But I think that the pandemic have changed the way we work for a very long time, if not forever, where hybrid, the possibility to choose and to feel that you are included and a first-class meeting citizen, no matter where you connect from, is here to stay. At Microsoft, we started this journey more than 10 years ago, and Microsoft in Sweden, we started like a slogan where we talked about work is not a place, it's something you do. And we had this during the kind of a campaign called the new way of working, and which started as a slogan, really, moved into become a central part of how we do our work. But for sure, just as everyone else or most other, businesses, we went home full time in March 2020. So even before that and after, we have full flexibility. So we offer individuals, employees at Microsoft, not just in Sweden, but across the globe, to decide where do they want to work. In the office or remote, most likely at home, or somewhere else, wherever they are while traveling or whatnot. So full flexibility. With that said, though, I think that there are instances where we see that it is great if individuals come together and meet physically in the office. So when we designed our new office at Microsoft in Stockholm, where we moved in November 2019, we moved from a suburb outside of Stockholm called Kista into central Stockholm. we designed the office to be centered around social gatherings. The core intention was not to fill the office with workspaces where you actually just come in and do the same type of work that you could do anywhere. We wanted to design social spaces. We have a barista and a barista place where you can come in and get world-class coffee, but you can also socialize with colleagues. And we have also other parts of the office that are social gatherings or workspaces that are intended for cross-group collaboration. So if we come to a position where the office feels like a magnet, which just drags or draws people into it, and you want to come there to be creative, you want to socialize, and you want to get inspiration from your colleagues, then I think we have achieved something.
I really like that. You mentioned you started this journey way before the pandemic, a long time ago. What are some of the things you've learned about processes, for instance, when it comes to online meetings or documentation or things like that, that you need to make sure that if people are working, whether they're working remotely or at the office, everyone is aligned, they feel included, and everyone is kind of, excited, in some way, part of a community? Anything that kind of stands out in terms of learnings that you've made over the years?
Yeah, so I think that there's tons of learnings on this. And the core principle, I think, that needs to be curiosity and a willingness for leaders, for managers and employees to try new things. Because I don't think that anyone has found the optimal solution yet. We need to be on a constant learning journey. And during the pandemic, we, just as everyone else, we tried so many things on how we can replace social gatherings like after works, happy hours, or fika, as we say in Sweden, or one-on-one meetings or team meetings. How can we find a good alternative to those meetings? And we tried a lot. So that's number one, to be curious and want to try new things. But there are a couple of things that we have learned, and I think that one of them is, if in this hybrid world, if you want to allow and enable people to connect to a meeting wherever they are, I think the meeting experience needs to be first class. You have to feel that you are included from a technology perspective, that you use the technology at hand, both when you're remote and when you're in the actual meeting room. So you have first class sound, you have first class video, you have first class, meeting notes and what have you. Everything that builds up a highly effective meeting, that needs to be available irregardless of where you're connecting from. So that's from a technology perspective. But then when it comes to the habits that everyone is engaging in, we have, drawn down a number of those habits. They are not kind of hard rules. They are just suggestions on good habits where, always try your best to put on the camera. But if you have one of those days where you don't want to show off, show who you are, you can actually use an avatar to have someone represent you, to make sure that you raise your hand, physically or virtually in the client that you're using, to not talk over each other and be respectful to each other, and make sure that you take notes and prepare the meetings. But that has been around for such a long time. But, leverage good meeting habits. But there are also a couple of other things that we have done. There's one thing that I have used in my team meetings, is that we have a check-in. We spend the first, 15, 20 minutes allowing for everyone participating in the meeting to do a check-in, where they can talk about, what state I am in, what am I doing on right now, what's happening in my private life, what am I working on, what kind of project am I working on right now, and what type of help do I need from this group. So just do a short check-in so that you feel that I have checked into this meeting and I have raised my voice at least once. That will enable me to continue to, engage and feel included.
I really like that. I think small things like that, they seem kind of like obvious or trivial, but they actually really make a big difference in creating a culture. What about measuring kind of productivity and output? How do you guys at Microsoft approach that in a hybrid context? You, for instance, mentioned off air about OKRs. Is that something that you employ at Microsoft?
Yeah, we do. Not everywhere and in every type of project or piece of the organization, but many are starting to use OKRs more and more. And OKRs obviously stands for objectives and key results. And I think this is stems from something that we have seen in research that is called the productivity paradox. And this became evident during the pandemic. And we have been, tracking this in how people work and trends around the workplace for several years, long before the pandemic. And the productivity paradox talks about that there's a difference between how employees or individuals see how they are being productive and how they measure their own productivity versus how management or leadership or organizations as a whole, how they look at productivity or effectiveness, really, where an individual who is working remotely, they feel that they are highly productive because they participate in so many meetings, they have a clean inbox, they don't have any unanswered chats, and they feel that they are just being highly productive. Versus leaders see that if they don't physically see their employees, there's this old notion of if you don't see them, how do you know if they are productive or actually working? So here's the paradox: highly productive sentiment from the employees, and there's a uncertainty from managers and leadership. What are my employees doing when they're not in the office? So if instead of measuring number of emails responded to and meetings attended, then we could lift it up a couple of notches and measure what is the organization's, what is the team's objectives, and measure that in key results, i.e. quantitative measurements of output from this team. And of course, this needs to be aligned between the employees and everyone in the team and leadership, and derivative from the organization's all-up mission, if you will. So we see, and I've started to use OKRs for some of the teams that I work with. What is our remit, and what do we want to make sure that we achieve from an objective standpoint, and then that we measure it, that we can show progress towards the key results.
Yeah, that's really good because OKR, I mean, using something like an OKR, it makes it measurable, but also it forces agreement and alignment between the managers and the team to agree on actually this is what matters most. And for hitting these numbers, I am being productive. My output is where it needs to be, even if you don't see me at the office, even if I don't respond to emails or things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that puts the focus on the work itself and takes the focus away from where you are actually at, where you are when you're doing or performing your work, which I think that organizations need to realize that hybrid work is here to stay. And I think that,
Yeah.
although we've been talking about this, we've been talking about leaders and managers, and of course, a big responsibility and a changed responsibility sits with the leaders and managers in organizations. And just as we are asking employees and individuals to adapt, managers and leaders need to do that too. And we have been working with a number of principles. This is a global initiative, a number of principles that are important for managers to think about. And it's three types of principles. The first one is coach. How do you support your employees to make sure that they feel that they do the best work they can and achieve what they want to achieve at work? That you act as a role model, that you show this is how we're working on inclusion, this is how we make sure that we have a diverse workplace, this is how we work when it comes to compliance, and a number of other of those role model type of initiatives that you as a leader has to do. And then the third one is what has become even more important during the pandemic is around the care dimension. How do you sincerely and authentically show care and concern for your employees? Their mental well-being, their physical well-being, and their development and growth is so important. And if you look at these three principles, I 100% believe that if you start with caring for your employees, you can somewhat get the permission to coach, and you can get the credibility to work on being a role model. So starting with care, and then you can get permission and credibility to do the other things.
That's really good and very, very actionable. Switching gears a little bit to talk about something that's become really core to Microsoft's overall strategy, really core, probably certainly to all tech companies, which is AI.
Oh, yeah.
Microsoft is a big investor in OpenAI. You've been working on your own AI initiatives before that or in parallel to that. So I think it's safe to say Microsoft is one of the leading AI companies in the world. So I'd just be curious to know how have you been implementing it internally already to improve business processes, whether it's operations, marketing, or just HR?
Yeah, so there's a number of internal initiatives where, as a technology company, we want to make sure that we as employees try this technology out firsthand, being our own beta testers and try new previews of technology. And there are some technologies that is actually out there in products and solutions that we have been testing, and I'm testing, using every day. Something in our employee experience offering that is called Viva, where there are so much data that is being able to be captured in how we use Outlook, how we use Teams, how we use any other of our productivity platforms. And in that offering, if we can show some of that data to the individual with, of course, the highest respect for individual integrity, so that the individual feel that the data on how I'm working is only being shown to me on an individual level. So you don't feel that your integrity is compromised. But then I can see when do my work hours start and when do my work hours end? And do I want to make a difference to that? If I feel that I'm working long hours, how much am I collaborating and interacting with my team members? Do I have frequent check-ins? Do I disturb them off hours, perhaps? Maybe I should reduce that. How is my network across the company from various organizations or departments? Am I doing enough interactions outside of my immediate organization? So, kind of insights that is AI powered on how am I doing my work. That is one of the things that we have been using for some time.
It must be so exciting because there are so many use cases. And with Microsoft, I mean, you have all the tools. You have the entire Office or like business suite. So you have all the data and all the tools, and you can just use AI to, like I said, drive those
Yeah,
insights. Is that available now to customers?
it is. And a lot of that data is stored, as you said, in the Microsoft 365 platform. And it's up to organizations to decide how do they want to surface that data to individuals with respect for both individual integrity and also local labor laws or the unions, collective agreements that are union and trade union agreements that are in place, of course. Then we have another thing that is recently launched. It is called meeting recap. You know, when you're taking place in a meeting like the one that you and I are having right now, or if there's more people taking place, you can record them. And that has been available for several years. But then, you know, if you didn't participate in that meeting, you can go back to recording. And guess what? We didn't see that many people, you know, listening to those recordings. You know, I'm thinking if you didn't have time in the first place, what's the likelihood that you have time in the second place? So then there is this opportunity, there's technological possibility of recording those meetings, and then there's the transcription of that meeting. And that transcription is being fed into ChatGPT, and you get a recap, like a short summary from that meeting. So instead of listening into a 1 hour meeting, you can actually spend 5 minutes reading that summary. And it is actually so smart that it listens into who was talking and if there were actions that someone, you know, took upon themselves. That is also being captured. So yeah, then you can just listen into to the summary instead.
That's pretty incredible. And I think it's clear, I mean, just from the examples that you've given, that companies that really start to use these AI tools are going to potentially see a huge increase in productivity.
Yeah.
So what would you have any tips or advice to management CEOs at companies they're not tech companies? They're hearing all about this AI. They're listening to this podcast right now and feeling like, oh shoot, there's so much we could be doing. But where do you even start? Like, is it just a matter of, where would you start?
So I think that there's a couple of things that is needed, and we see many organizations in Sweden and worldwide, you know, being super curious and starting initiatives on AI. And what we see that many are doing is that they are investing time in offering trainings and education to their team members or the employees on AI. We see that there's so much information being offered across the world on AI. So make sure that employees actually get reserved time to train themselves on AI. Various educational efforts to make sure that there's a basic knowledge and basic understanding of AI. And then allow employees to think about what can they contribute around AI, how can they develop or use AI in their everyday work. So training is number one. And the second one, I think that is around leaders and managers. They have to be curious and have a growth mindset to make sure that they listen to employees on what positive impact can AI do in our organizations. So when you have trained the employees, they will immediately start thinking about initiatives or projects where AI can make a difference, and that needs to be taken care of by leaders in the organization. So, many organizations that have a constant development realize that what took us here won't take us to the future and the growth that we want to achieve. So make sure that internalize all those initiatives that is coming from the employees. And the third one, which I think is most important, so is instead of writing a AI strategy, start trying and testing prototypes in the organization by having workshops, by having hackathons on AI. We worked with an organization in Sweden called AI Sweden and a large system integrator called ITEA here in Sweden, and had a AI hackathon for public sector. And it was a one-day hackathon, and in the morning there was this creative phase where you come up with ideas, and there was almost 600 ideas that came up in just a matter of 2 hours. And then the next process was, qualifying those ideas. But just thinking about 33 different organizations came together, came up with almost 600 ideas. So
That's
let
incredible.
the creativity flourish and listen to the employees.
Yeah, I think it sounds like what you are able to do there is you're able to take maybe this apathy or fear of AI that some people have, this because it's so powerful and so unknown, and instead look at, well, how can we use this and make it an inspiring and motivating thing to start exploring a new technology and use it to
Yeah,
do great
100%.
things.
And what you touch upon there is that we have to make sure that when we do advancements in technology in AI, because it has become so enormously powerful, we have to make sure that responsible AI development goes hand in hand. And we spend a lot of time and resources on that when we're developing our own AI technology for our customers, to make sure that it is done in a responsible way. And a number of responsible AI principles is something we adhere to every day when we develop AI for our own technology. It's around transparency, it's around equality, and it's around security and compliance. That is important. And when organizations develop their own AI, they also have to think about how do they make sure that they do that in a responsible way. And here we as a tech industry needs to come together and talk about what is a responsible AI development.
Speaking of AI, are you already kind of seeing any impact in how marketing and sales is done in general, or do you think we're going to see that in the very near future? I'm thinking, for instance, this opens up the opportunity of creating these chatbots that could help customers in the B2B buying cycle or enterprise buying cycle answer questions and kind of guide them. How do you think about that? Is that something you're paying attention to, or you're seeing already change?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there have been many real life customer examples that have started using AI in their own customer engagement and market engagement. The one particular case is Lindex, a large Swedish fashion retailer, who has developed something they call Lindex Copilot, where they are enabling employees in stores to have a handheld device, and they can actually have a conversational AI with that handheld device to make sure that they can respond to questions from customers. What if this clothing garment is available in what size, what color, and in which store, or whether it's available online, to enable sales to a high degree and first-class customer service. And I think that we will see many of those more examples coming in various industries for sure.
Yeah, it does feel like we're gonna, for the next couple of years, it's gonna be, or maybe for the rest of our lives, but it's gonna be pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Is there anything kind of on the horizon, whether it's technology, business, or any other kind of business area that you personally are particularly excited about? Anything that you kind of, you're looking forward to or paying attention to?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of trends, and one trend that has been evident for many years is how the enterprise buying behavior is becoming more and more digital. That you spend much more time researching um, before you engage with a sales representative from a company. So, as an enterprise buyer, you are much more knowledgeable about the technology or product or investment that you're about to make. Just as we have seen in the consumer space for a long time, where you can you can look at social media, you can do on comparison sites, and you can do research on vendors' websites. You, even in the enterprise space, are becoming much more knowledgeable, and that you guide yourself in the buying journey to a larger extent than before, where sales reps was the only one perhaps guiding you through that purchase journey. You are guiding yourself and looking at various digital assets and going to events or whatnot before you actually engage with the seller. So that digital first, if you will, digital first engagement has become evident in enterprise as well. But I think that the physical meeting, that meeting with a specialist or a generalist with the customer and the customer team, is much more valuable today than it was before. Instead of just meeting ad hoc or with a random purpose, now that makes much more sense, and you have a much more or a much deeper interaction because the customer is much more prepared. You as a seller or a specialist needs to be much more prepared, and you can come much more deeper in those conversations. So the physical meeting, the physical interaction, I don't think that will ever die.
I think that's a really good to kind of wrap up our conversation that's been mostly focused on technology by reminding us that we are human, and the human element is really important, regardless of how much the world changes.
Absolutely.
Thomas, it's been a real pleasure to have you on. Where is the place where the best place for people if they want to connect with you and follow what you're doing? LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Thomas with TH, Floberg at Microsoft in Sweden. I think everyone can find me, and I'm happy to engage. You can also send an email, thomas.floberg@microsoft.com, and I would love to engage with your listeners.
All right. Like I said, thank you so much for coming on, and wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you. Thanks for a lovely conversation.
Thank you for listening. You can find all episodes of The Growth Pod on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.